Welcome everyone to the Dr. Todd Talks Tune Show. I'm your host, Dr. Todd Samra, and today we have a very exciting episode where we introduce you to the music of Antonio Salieri. Who? Antonio Salieri, the bad guy from the movie Amadeus, the Mozart movie. And of course, that movie won a number of Oscars back in 1984, most notably the actor who played Salieri. F. Murray Abraham was the name of the actor, and it's probably very difficult for many of us to divorce the image of F. Murray Abraham in our mind from our image of what maybe Salieri looked like and was like as a real person. So what we want to do today is just simply present a little bit to you about the life and music of Antonio Salieri and let you judge for yourself. A little bit about that. Of course, the movie was based on the 1979 play by Peter Shaffer, which was also entitled Amadeus. And of course, the film was then directed by Milos Forman in 1984. A little bit about the name Amadeus, because Mozart wasn't born with that name. He chose that and changed it. What it was, his middle name was actually Gottlieb. And Gottlieb is not a terribly exciting name in the German world, but if you translate Gottlieb, you basically get love of God, quite literally. So if you take the Latin equivalent to that, you would get Amadeus. So that Amadeus, that was something that he kind of reconstructed because he didn't like his middle name. Salieri, back to Salieri, he was really the bridge between several generations of music and musicians, including Mozart, because he got to witness Mozart at the court in Vienna. But he also was the teacher of Beethoven and Schubert, Czerny and Liszt also. His resume of students is quite impressive. And probably the most salient observation about Salieri was that he dominated French opera in particular, but also German and Italian operas during part of his lifetime. He, of course, succeeded part of the Viennese heritage, which included such notable people as Fuchs and Gluck and Gassmann, who really played a very active role in his life. Now, Salieri's early life, he learned to play violin and harpsichord, basically took lessons from his older brother. He became an orphan at age 15. So his brother took on some of that responsibility for a year, but then a year later, in 1766, he goes to Vienna under the wing of this Florian Gassmann, who would not only be a teacher, but a lifelong friend to him. He also would become friends then in Vienna with Gluck in 1769. And Gluck eventually would become one of his patrons. He actually worked directly for Gluck for some time in Paris. Salieri had a number of big breaks. His first major operatic achievement was Armida in 1771. And then, after Gassmann dies in 1774, he becomes court composer under Emperor Joseph II in Vienna. Also a very famous character from the movie Amadeus. Too many notes. That guy is the guy who is Joseph II. While he's there, he conducts the Italian opera. So at the age of 24, Salieri is really holding one of the most important musical appointments in all of Europe. It's really quite impressive. He gets married in 1775. The woman he marries, her name is Theresia Helferstorfer. Sorry that took me a minute. Here it is, Theresia Helfenstorfer. And she bore him 8 children, so he had a very active life. His greatest success, as I mentioned, was in Paris, where he dominated French opera from 1784 to 88. He succeeded Gluck there. His first French opera was originally attributed to Gluck. The second one, which was in 1786, was a complete failure. But his third opera, which is Tarare in 1787, or Tarar, was his greatest operatic success. He used Vincenzo Da Ponte, who you may know worked with Mozart on the great 3 Mozart collaborations, the opera buffa, Marriage of Figaro, the Don Giovanni, and of course All Women Do This. Those three, which are all very, very funny. And he was working with Da Ponte in Vienna, and that's kind of how Mozart met Da Ponte, was through Salieri. So we wouldn't get those three great comedies without this connection. So when Gluck dies in 1787, he loses his not only a patron, but he loses a father figure in his life. Between 1788 and 1604, he will compose 16 more operas, but 3 of those are never performed, and 1 of them was left unfinished. I do want to play a little bit just to give you a sample of his music, and I want to start with the music from one of his operas. This is called Regina di Persia, or the Queen of Persia, from Palmira. So right off the bat here, sounds quite a bit like Mozart, quite a bit like Haydn, quite a bit like Gluck, early Beethoven. So there's a lot of connection you can hear in the style between these different composers of this time. The death of Joseph II in 1790, the too many notes guy, deprives him of his patron at court. He gave him a way out, but really Joseph II, the opportunity that he gave Salieri was great, because Salieri was really the musical rope, if you will, of the 1780s. Everything that was going on in Vienna during that decade was very much connected to him. He dies, Salieri dies in 1825, which is 2 years before Beethoven and 3 years before Schubert, who were both 2 of his pupils. He was most active as a teacher. He's probably best regarded, really, as one of the great teachers in music history. Of course, he retired then in 1804, taught Beethoven, Schubert, Czerny, Hummel, and Liszt. Also taught W.A. Mozart Jr. and Franz Xavier Süssmayr. And if you remember, Süssmayr was the gentleman who actually finished the Requiem for Costanza Mozart so she could collect the rest of the fee for Mozart's final work. So Süssmayr had also studied with him. Probably his most notable feature, as I just said, was really being a teacher. He was also very good at working with text underlay in compositions, and it's no secret that Beethoven would show up to his apartment. This is like between 1798 and 1801. Beethoven would show up to Salieri's apartment with like a stack of manuscripts and just say, just do it. And what he meant was, take it upstairs and put the text underlay under the notes that I've written here and make it fit. Beethoven, he was still relatively young at this point and hadn't really mastered the art of doing text underlay. Of course, in 1804, Salieri officially says he's retiring from composing, and in doing so writes his own Requiem, which is nothing at all like the Mozart Requiem itself. And to give a little bit of that, I want to play a little bit of the offertory movement. I mean, is it good music? Yes. Is it as good as the Mozart? No. Interestingly, I just got done watching a couple of different TV shows, the Watchmen on HBO and The Crown, and it's interesting how there were references in both to the Lacrimosa from the Mozart Requiem, and how powerful of a piece of music that is, and how many times I heard it over the course of a week just between these 2 TV shows. So that really, I think, is the big difference. Is this bad music? No, it's not bad music at all. But it doesn't simply have the depth or the reach that and the power, really, that Mozart's music had. That's really the kind of part that's really kind of lacking in it. Schubert, I also mentioned him. Franz Schubert, he was a regular pupil between 1812 and 1817, and actually dedicated several of his own works to Salieri, so pretty significant there. So Salieri, he's Italian by birth, but generally speaking, compositionally, we really group him together really with more German composers and French composers, because he really didn't spend much time in Italy. He did, learn a little bit in Venice, but moved on from there to Vienna and to Paris. So he spent most of his career there. His relevance as a composer really diminishes after 1788. He did write a number of oratorios, but they're in the old style Italian design. The new style that's going to take over, of course, early in the 1800s is Haydn's Creation, which is really based on the Handelian model, the more English model, if you will, for writing oratorios. So really, the oratorios that he wrote weren't often performed because even within his own lifetime, they were considered somewhat to be, kind of old school. He wrote a lot of church and choral works. He wrote 46 total operas, which is 4 more than Handel. He wrote 2 piano concertos, and he wrote several orchestral and chamber works. I want to conclude just by bringing up a few references related to Salieri within the context of modern popular culture. For example, there's a segment of The Simpsons, an episode labeled the Margical History Tour. And apparently Salieri is represented by Lisa Simpson and Bart Simpson represents Mozart. That's kind of cool. In episode 17 of season 5 of Family Guy, entitled It Takes a Village Idiot and I Married One, the Griffin family is wearing powdered wigs in their living room, and Stewie begins playing several classical compositions, including those by Haydn and Handel. And then apparently Peter makes a request that he imitate the compositional style of Peter Griffin. So apparently Stewie says, does this. He plays a painfully simplistic tune while hunched over, but then afterwards Peter says, "Go ahead, mock me." But it wasn't Stewie who was laughing at me. It was God, like a direct quote from Amadeus, which, and then the Mozart Dies Irae plays. It's really awesome. And apparently there's another one in episode 4 from season 1, A Family Guy, where Lois is teaching a piano lesson in the background. Somebody plays a wrong note, and Stewie yells out, "It's E flat, Salieri!" So it's kind of interesting how he's made his way into popular culture through film and TV, but yet we really don't know a whole lot about his music. So I would encourage you to maybe listen and look up some of the pieces that we looked at today and decide for yourself whether you consider him to be a great composer or not. And if not, at least we can take comfort in the fact that he was a great teacher. Speaking of great people, next week our episode is on Ella Fitzgerald. I'm very, very happy to present an episode about her. I think she's one of the greatest singers, if not the greatest singer of the 20th century. She's a great hero of mine, and we're going to do an episode on her. And then the week after that, we're going to look at our first of 2 episodes on the elements of composition. And we're going to talk about harmonic function in kind of a very useful, user-friendly way. Thank you for joining us today on Dr. Todd Talks Tunes. We're looking forward to hearing from you and seeing you again in the upcoming weeks. Thank you.